A Visitor's Guide to the End of the World. Introduction. The Capital. Not long after the climate wars, I found myself in the ruins of a dead city. It was a place once filled with marble monuments gleaming beneath glittering lights, a place my grandfather had walked many years prior. He told me stories of the splendor that this place once held. He told me of the honest dishonesty of the people who lived there, and of the unending trail of things to do. He recalled with misty eyes gone gray from the thermal flashes of walking these streets in his youth. He told me he felt waves of appreciation for the splendor of the place he'd been born in as he stood beside a statue of a man in a chair 100 feet high and read the words beside that great stone man. He said he once got lost in a park called Rock Creek during a hurricane. One moment he was driving along a busy street late at night, and the next he was suddenly in a prehistoric rainforest. Once, my grandfather said, he played hooky from work to go with his friends to the Smithsonian Zoo, where he saw animals of extraordinary variety all serenely playing in their pens. But he said his best day in that white city was characterized by the simple act of eating a lobster sandwich on a set of frightening stairs. It was in that white city, standing on the top of those stairs, that this book became a reality. On that trip, I was on my way through the dilapidated byways from the ruins of Manhattan to the flooded bogs of Florida with the Broken Men, a caravan that still operates along those routes. I had planned to travel with the Broken Men, who were in actuality mostly women, to my modest holding outside Fredericksburg along the seaboard to pick up news in Raleigh and then continue on my way south. We hadn't intended to stop in the ruins of Washington at all, but an unfortunate run-in with an unusually aggressive bobcat saw 2 of our number injured outside Alexandria. The need for antibiotics following a bite from anything in those areas cannot be understated, so plans were made to scout the hospitals. Of the band of 10, 2 had been lost to the things that live in the Catskills the previous year, and another 2 were now ill and unable to move. 2, of course, had to remain behind to guard the caravan against raiders, and another 2 had no experience in hunting or raiding at all. So that's how the Broken Men asked me, a virtual stranger, to save their ailing friends. Well, I say asked. They asked at gunpoint. Never mind that they hadn't had an ammunition resupply in 6 months. They were more than happy to spend their last bullets on me. I agreed. I like making friends anyway, and I find that life is much easier if we all help each other out. So, for the modest price of 1 book of their choosing, I donned my hazmat suit, laced up my boots, took 2 of my last 4 radiation pills, and rafted across the Potomac with a scrappy young person named Shadow to hunt through the ruins of Washington. The mission itself was an unmitigated success. Shadow would later describe me as the most insufferable thing that had ever taken a breath, owing no doubt to my tendency to prattle on about anything that comes into my head. But aside from the overtures of surly silence, we made our way by the ancient Atlas toward Howard University Hospital, and spent 3 uneventful hours digging through rubble until we found an ancient rusted medical chest. Shadow could not read and resented the idea that she should have said that before coming on the mission, but I found penicillin without much difficulty, and a number of other useful things besides. We encountered another band of raiders on our way back, and had to go wide through a place of brick and stone to avoid them. It was then that I found myself standing at the top of that set of stairs, now crumbled and barely passable. My grandfather's stories had been threatening to intrude in my thoughts all trip, as Shadow could surely tell you, but now they burst forth unbidden to remind me of all the things my wrinkled namesake told me at his knee. This was a cursed place, I remembered out loud. Lost in reverie and looking around with new eyes, I was struck by the knowledge that I was standing on the same bricks where my grandfather had eaten a lobster sandwich in the June sunshine, nearly 100 years before. He had told me how beautiful this place was, how much he had loved the salty, clean smell of the air and the bright whites and reds and browns of the squat little buildings. Tears tugged behind my goggles. "This is a cursed place now," Shadow replied through her gas mask. She was clearly eager to leave. I handed her my supplies and clearly marked the bottles that would help her companions with infection, swelling reduction, and pain. She was alarmed at the prospect of returning alone, but she tried to hide it. She asked me why I wasn't coming back, and I told her that there was something that I needed to see. She quietly rafted away under the ruined pylons of what used to be the Francis Scott Key Memorial Bridge, and I set off on my own. There wasn't much to see, to most people, that is, but then, most people don't look like I did that day. Most people would look at the broken ruins of the Washington Monument and the Smithsonian lying half on its side, and begin mapping out routes and identifying the parts most likely to still have supplies, and of course, which bits are the most defensible. Now, don't get me wrong, I saw those things too. You die pretty fast if you don't know what parts of a city are friendly and most likely to have fresh water, but I saw something else in that ash-gray corpse of that sparkling city. I saw something beautiful. When I looked at the Washington Monument lying on its side in 3 great pieces, I didn't just map it. I superimposed it over the memories of my grandfather, the desolation. It was beautiful in a haunted sort of way. The White House was a crater and had been for decades, but the foundation of the Capitol building still stood with scattered pillars. I stood where my grandfather had stood, or near enough, and read the words on the shattered marble beneath the surface of the reflecting pool. They were broken and marred and weather-worn, and parts were missing altogether, but I filled them in my grandfather's voice. From these honored dead, we devote to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. We resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. To most people today, places like this are obstacles, no more interesting than a hill, but to me, with those new eyes, they became more than just relics, they became destinations. From the glacial lakes that now turned into toxic pools, to the twisted remains of Disney World, the wars and the nightmares that followed brought an unexpected allure to the landscapes left behind. So I started recording them, writing them down, and taking pictures with my precious little Polaroids. Some sites, like the Vegas Strip, have been reduced to charred bones. Those are famous but deadly, populated by roving bands of headhunters. Others, like the Statue of Liberty, now half submerged and technically in New Jersey, are beautiful but equally dangerous. In this book, I aim to guide you through the post-apocalyptic destinations you can explore, and how best to approach them. It covers the mundane places made interesting by the fallout, and the once glorious cities now made strange by desolation and destruction. Welcome to the New World, a world where history lies scattered in ruins, waiting for those with the courage to see it. 1. Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls was once a wonder of the world, and that has not changed. The breathtaking beauty of the waterfalls has not diminished in recent years. The falls sees far fewer visitors nowadays, which brings kind of an eerie peace to the area. When you visited Goat Island before the first climate war, you would have had to fight through mobs of tourists from all over the world, and even on its busiest days, it was rare to find fewer than 100 people on the viewing platform. The air was full of horns, and the skies were full of the lights from the casino and Ferris wheel across the river. But now, it's just you, with nothing but the roar of the water to keep you company. It's an amazing place to visit, to just stand with your hand on the railing and look down at the water. But if you're of a more adventurous bend, bring some rope and hooks. You can rappel down the shaft that once held the Cave of the Winds elevator and stand on the decks which sit at the bottom of the falls, curiously untouched by time or the roaring of the water, just as they were when they were teeming with tourists. The only change you might notice is the Maid of the Mist, which once was seen carting tourists under the waterfall itself, but now rests on the rocks on one side of the river, barely visible beneath the waves. A note for the traveler. The elevator can still be seen far down below. It was severed by the first of the Vandals who made Niagara Falls State Park their home, but you don't need to worry about them anymore. Lake Erie and Lake Ontario never freeze anymore, and the first of the real snows came in the second year after the first climate war. These Vandals were industrious and resilient, but no match for the winters of western New York. They froze to the insides of their F-250s. Warning. Do not drink the water. The Robert Moses Power Station in Lewiston, New York, was one of the first targets by the dissident group Agents of Change during the Second Climate War. During the Battle of Buffalo, the Agents of Change detonated a small nuclear device inside the RMPS, permanently knocking out the last sustainable power for New York City, and poisoning the water that flows through the station down into Lake Ontario. As such, visitors should never drink the water. Fish are still common in these waters, but eating them is not advised unless you're a huge fan of radiation poisoning, though this is not new. The fish in western New York had been toxic long before the wars. Curiously, given the formidable weather and the difficulty getting there is still a small group of survivors in Niagara Falls, Ontario, living in what they call New Niagara. This small group of scientists and traders have reactivated the hydroelectric generators of the Ontario Power Company generating station, providing power and heat to much of southern Ontario. They are an intrepid group, who I got along with very well and whom I like very much. This close-knit community is cautious but friendly to outsiders, but since all bridges connecting New York to Ontario were blown, they can only be visited by boat or by crossing at Watertown or circling around to the ruins of Detroit. 2. Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave was once a haven for casual spelunkers wanting to explore one of the world's oldest and most beautiful cave systems. It featured some of the purest water and most impressive cave features in the world, including stalactites, natural arches, and underground lakes. All of that is still true, but the local Kentuckians have found an additional use for the caves. Because of its isolation deep in the Appalachian Mountains, it became extremely defensible, and many residents of Kentucky and Tennessee sheltered here during the first weapon exchanges. Over the next few years, a biologist named Kendall Anderson found that the fresh water in the cave was virtually untouched by radiation. So, with her as leader, those sheltering in Mammoth Cave founded a permanent settlement which has come to bear the name Anderson. Anderson is invisible from the air or ground and is only accessible through a small number of closely guarded cave entrances. Visitors must submit to searches on entrance, but the residents are always eager for trade to supplement the fish farmed deep inside underground lakes. I have seen in my travels many wonderful and interesting places, so I do not say this lightly. Anderson is beautiful. The original dwellings of the residents of the town were little more than cots and portable heating units huddled together in the wider areas. But over time they have widened by pickaxe and shovel to become homes and houses, schools, a city hall, a trading post, and even a theater, all strung together with lights powered by small hydroelectric generators and outfitted with a sewer system that Kendall Anderson designed herself. Over time, the town of Anderson became crowded, so the residents explored more of the cave system and found more suitable areas for settlements. All told, Mammoth Cave boasts a population of more than 10,000, between two towns, Anderson and Mammoth, and 4 small villages, Nashville, Chattanooga, New Memphis, and Kevin. Yes, Kevin. Warnings. Do not try to go to Mammoth Cave through anything other than a settlement's designated entrance. Best case scenario will see you locked out by a formidable steel and concrete door that one of the towns has put up. But, in worst case scenario, you'll find yourself in one of the smaller entrances and make your way in without permission. You are as likely to find a friendly reception as you are to feel chilly on the Vegas Strip. Finally, Mammoth Cave covers an area of nearly 100 square miles over 7 levels. The residents find new entrances or break through walls to find entirely new passages every year. The residents of Kevin tell tales to their children of monsters in the dark which crawl along the stone ceiling and live in the bottoms of deep pools, waiting to drag young fools under. The truth is far more insidious. The twists and turns of Mammoth Cave are so numerous that even an experienced explorer can find themselves lost if not properly equipped. Lost travelers, of which there have been many, are likely to wander and wander and wander until their lights die and they're calling out in the dark. I'll say to you the same thing that Cavanian parents tell their kids. Do not wander off. This is a sample. If it's the sort of thing that you like, please tell me. Thank you for listening.